In 2011, Staff Sergeant Ben Sekel and his wingman Charlie deployed to Afghanistan from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina. Their main missions were bomb detection and base security, but they were also qualified for patrols outside the wire.
It was, the weather was bad. It rained the night before, so there was a little bit of water on the ground, which is always kind of a concern for explosive teams, as any kind of moisture on the ground can dissipate explosive odor, so it makes our job a little bit more difficult.
The job is to look for danger and hope you don't find it, but on May 8th, they did.
Things were going well, no incident. We got, I would say max 2 clicks away from the base on a route, and then all of a sudden, just kind of out of nowhere, everything kind of just went crazy. There was a very loud explosion. It just seemed like it was right on top of us, off to our left and behind us. And it was at that moment that I knew that something had gone wrong.
The blast was from an improvised explosive device. The IED had wounded a member of the patrol, and the mission was called off. But Sergeant Sekel's team was operating far forward and separated from the rest of the unit, so they chose an alternate route back to base, one that would allow them to avoid the potentially dangerous area of the explosion, but would also prevent the foreman and Charlie from rejoining the rest of the squad.
And we made it back to within sight of the T-walls at the installation, so we thought we were pretty much home free. So down they went, 1, 2, 3, went across, and they set up on the opposite end. Then it was my turn to go. So took one last look behind me, slung my rifle kind of across my chest, turned around, and I think I took maybe 1 or 2 steps, and just the whole ground underneath me just... I remember getting, tossed up in the air, probably about 1,000 feet. It was probably only about 3 or 4. Hit the ground. It was kind of like this sickening, like thudding sound. It's like you felt it, but you heard it. First thought, right off the bat, where's my rifle? It's right here on my chest. Now it's gone. So I start trying to find it. So I thought I saw it, and I started moving towards it. And then I realized that Charlie wasn't there. He was gone. He was tethered to me by a leash. The leash was cut. So I'm looking for the gun. I'm calling for the dog. Probably looked all kinds of ridiculous. And I remember one of the guys who was with us jumped down to where I was in this little crater, if you will. And I guess I wasn't listening. So he kind of hit me on the side of my helmet and told me I needed to be still. He said, "Hey Ben, you got some problems."
The explosion had taken away more than just Ben's rifle. It had removed his leg from the mid-shin down. His teammates used their combat life-saving skills to staunch the bleeding and keep Ben alive. But what about Charlie?
For the life of me, I have no idea how he survived. The only thing that I can think of after the fact is that we were kind of on the side of a hill, or a slope, if you will, gradual slope, and he was just a little bit higher in an elevation than I was. And I think he was just kind of on the outside of the blast. He was a couple feet away from me because I gave him a little bit of leash.
The first injured airman was on the squad's only litter, so Ben Sekel, loaded down with combat gear and missing a leg, would walk back to base.
They got me up on my right leg was still pretty good. It was chewed up a little bit and burned by shrapnel. So I had an airman on each side, threw my arm up over their shoulder, and we kind of hop, skipped, and jumped as best we could back to the ECP.
Charlie, with 2 blown eardrums and a hind quarter full of shrapnel, would walk with them.
And the first time that I saw him again was when I woke up in the hospital room after my first surgery in Bagram. They brought him in, and Charlie was not a cuddly dog. He was not very emotional. He's not the dog that runs to you when you get home and jumps up on you, puts his paws on your shoulders. It's not him. Very subtle with his affection. But that day he came in and he's pulling at the leash and he's dragging the handler across the room, and he jumped up. He kind of laid down next to me, panting and fussing a bit. So I knew that he was happy to see me.
Most airmen, after losing a limb, would put aside the uniform. Not Ben Sekel. He would spend the next 5 months healing, and then learning to walk, and then learning to run. And when he remastered those skills, he decided to remaster another.
And I went from Walter Reed back to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina, 4th Fighter Wing, which is where I was stationed at the time. And I knew that when I got back, because I could walk at this point, I could run, but I didn't know if I was going to be able to handle dogs. So I asked, if I could get put back in the kennels, and they say yes.
And of course, he had an old friend to help him on his journey.
So Charlie, we actually paired back up. So he was with me for my recovery. So I used him as my test dummy for my re-education, if you will, into dog handling. And we actually recertified as a certified bomb team a couple of months after I got back and went right back to work.
Staff Sergeant Segal would eventually pin on new ranks, move to new bases, and take on new missions. The young Staff Sergeant who lost his leg in Afghanistan is now a Senior Master Sergeant, one who was recognized in 2020 as the best First Sergeant on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But his partnership with Charlie continued even after he left the kennels.
So he was older, so it came time for him to retire. So when he retired, we took him home. And then when I came home, he would follow me everywhere I went. Everywhere. If I got up, he moved. When I sit down, he would sit down. Wherever I was, he was between me and everything else. That's where he felt he needed to be. He needed to be between me and, danger, if you will.
The duo of Ben and Charlie eventually came to an end. Charlie passed away in 2015. He was laid to rest where he had learned to be an airman, the kennels of Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. But his master, his friend, his wingman, still has a soft spot for a salty old dog.
When he did something, or when he said something in his way, it meant something. It wasn't flippant, and he didn't give it to anybody else.